about regulations, because I started from the effect, then we did measurements, and now we are talking about regulations, what are in effect in other countries. To remind, it was from our study, and the regulations what are used for combating the light. Sorry, lähen eesti keele peale tagasi, mul oli eelmises küsimus.
Sorry, I will go back now. I will switch to Estonian again. So talking about regulations for reduction of light pollution. Well, generally they have been divided into 4 different groups. It's laws and orders, it's thresholds, standards, and also methods for decreasing pollution. And very often also there are thresholds or limits in place. I like them very much. Why? Because I like numbers. Because this is a subjective basis, but if we go and do our measurements, as Toivo was talking about, then we need these thresholds. There was an international workshop where European Union and associated countries were assessed the light pollution reduction measures. And I chose some of the countries, as the Czech Republic was the country that compiled these reduction measures. Then I chose Czech Republic, Lithuania, that is not far from here, and also Estonia. So why would I like to bring these countries out? As all other scientific studies have to be approached critically. Estonia has XXX in this table. We don't have any standards or handbooks, but in Czech Republic it's all positive and nice. But that's not really the case. I'm going to illustrate that. But then let's talk about Czech Republic. In 2002, they introduced their Air Protection Act, where they have written in that light pollution is a problem. We have to deal with it. Later on, this legal act was also amended, and then in this amendment process, the topics of light pollution were left out. But then another legal act was introduced. It's a legal act on protection of nature and landscapes. And there they included also protection from light pollution, and there they have their descriptions about it. Then also Act on Buildings was introduced, but the situation in Lithuania, they have been criticized a lot, although they are a member of LUCI and they don't have had any renovation projects in street lighting. On the other hand, they have recognized that problems do exist and they are working on that. In other words, we cannot say that they are not doing anything. And this study said about Estonia many important points. Basically, what has been described in the presentations already today. The study that was presented today was not the first one, because in 2012 the first study was carried out by the University of Technology. In other words, the study carried out recently was an additional continuation study. The satellite pictures were earlier not used. Instead, measurements were carried out from the roofs of the cars. I know that there are people from Tartu participating today here also in Tartu, that there is a pilot project going on to develop healthy lighting projects and to create handbooks about this. And Tartu as well as Tallinn are also members of LUTSI. And a good example is that there was a light behind my window earlier, now it's not there. In other words, Tallinn has recognized the problems and tries to minimize the problem. And Tallinn was also one of the spots where Lucia project, pilot project was carried out. A green area was reconstructed during this project. So I think that it was Kanutiaed, the area that was renovated. And there we can see that the goals of lighting devices has been reached. And there is a goal certainly for every lighting device, and there are mirrorings certainly as well, but that's exactly as we were saying earlier, we can't influence the snow, for example. But in this Czech document, it's said about Estonia that we are also on our way. Our nearest neighbors as Finns, they carried out the same kind of study in 2021, and we have Finnish guests here today. And correct me if I'm wrong, they have compiled handbooks how to install light devices, and also different other instructions. And here you can see what I like. There are numbers, there are thresholds. They divided in their projects the areas into 5, and there are city centers with high buildings. They got a threshold for 25 lux before restriction times in the evenings. And these numbers are all important. I will come back to them later, because according to Toivo's presentation, the standards in force in Estonia, these numbers were 10 and 2 lux. So the Finnish study assesses these thresholds as higher. I don't know why, what the reason was, but in the summary I'm coming back to this. And then 25.5 and the Croatian Republic has 8.2 lux for this. So as you can see, every country has really focused on compiling rules about avoiding light pollution, but they don't coincide one-to-one with what Toivo mentioned before and after restriction times during day and night. But here they have divided the time for when the lighting devices are used. Then the levels are not that low, but it's important that the functions are fulfilled. And the third country that has introduced also threshold in lux, although they in their document said lumen per square meter, that is lux, every specialist knows it. But it's maybe not clear for non-specialists. And here they say 35 lux. So compared with Estonia and Finland, that's very high, and they don't have any difference between day and night. And theoretically, they could have lower threshold in France. They don't have this kind of threshold. But now, while in France, in Croatia, in legislation, they have lighting values. Estonian standards that Toivo also showed. In Estonia, it was acceptable 20 candelas per square meter according to standard. Why am I saying according to standard, not law? Everybody knows that the standards are not obligatory as laws are. And they have in the biggest zone 1,000 candelas per square meter, but they have also introduced hours for even lower lighting periods during dark periods of the day. So Croatia has a different approach. And Tarmo and others were discussing whether it all depends on the wealth of the country. For example, South Korea, they there have introduced even higher values, not lux per square meter, and they can afford it. They can also photograph with measurement cameras, and they can give faster answers about lighting. But we were looking at different approaches about brightness or lightness. Now let's take Italy. They have their own requirements, and what should be pointed out is about the threshold of streets is much lower compared to decorative lighting. And maybe my approach is not aesthetic, but from my point of view, their street lighting is too low. Their functions should be fulfilled better. But this table is only true about the area of Lazio, not other regions. And although I don't support unified approach for all the countries, Russia and China, but their approach should still be based on cooperation. But here I will conclude the presentations about foreign countries. And I will continue with something that is nearer, and this is about regulations in the European Union. And it doesn't say it's for regulating light pollution. It's simply, it says environmental friendly state procurement. I have also named in my presentation what the regulations are, directives, the numbers of the directives. But for environmental friendly state procurements, there are recommendations from the European Union. What procurements are focusing on environment, not only on CO2 emissions, but also in light design. And in Estonia, we have also studied how these environmental friendly state procurements are used. And in my view, this study is even more important because recommended criteria were inserted into these procurements, considering also EU regulations. What did they do? They were talking to different bidders, different builders, participants in procurements, and they draw a conclusion that the situation is not the best in environmental friendly state procurements. But we would also need common approaches because it could happen that from different local governments approaches can be a little bit different, and they decided to put together the criteria that could be used all over. But how are environmental friendly state permits connected to light pollution? Well, it says that what is light that is directed upwards, it is 0% of general lighting, but still it adds a lot to light pollution. And the goal is generally to structure pointed lighting in a specific way, and the temperature should not be more than 4,000 kelvins. In other words, very cold light should be avoided. And general public light can be affected a lot by the government. And now, again, I will mention some numbers that I like. And the result of this study says that we should definitely also check what we are doing. And checks should be carried out by accredited labs. So accredited labs is something that has been assessed by an external specialist. So 4 parties in all in all, the ones who participate, constructors, assessing labs, etc. And there are different indexes that should be assessed. All different 4 parameters that create safety and that are a part of the requirements. Now let's come back to the table where Estonia had 3 X's. In fact, we still do have one legal act that regulates also light pollution. It's the general part of environmental code. The goal of this in its first paragraph says that the goal is to reduce environmental disturbances to a maximum. And local governments have also been working on reduction of light pollution. And 2 local governments have created rules for advertising, and these 2 cities are Tallinn and Rakvere. Rakvere is halfway to Russian border. And another document is the development strategy of Tallinn. There is a point about lighting, and the 3 last words are the most important ones. There is a minimal amount of light pollution. Valgusreostust esineb minimaalselt. And what do we need for that? We need energy-saving LEDs. We need also to guarantee safety in the best possible way, and also to make it possible for people to feel good. In other ways, we do have a goal, and we, in implementing this goal, we indirectly also add to a reduction of light pollution. And then we also have international standards. There are numbers of international standards here, and they exist in Estonia, and also they have been translated into Estonian. It's for outdoors, indoors, and for lamps and lighting devices. And in other words, we do have tools, we do have different standards that have to be included into procurements as well, that also help to reduce light pollution. And what's important as well is monitoring. Every good idea that is created by researchers or specialists has no value if it's not monitored. Otherwise, it does not have any value. But of course, studies are good, but monitoring is also important. In other words, in Estonian legislation, light pollution has been pointed out as a problem. And in the European Union, we do have also possibilities to do the same. I like also thresholds. In other words, the problem that I want to underline is that 8, 2, 25, 5, 15, 10, 2, 2 looks to 35 looks, the example from France. So we have to specify all this. And now my own point follows. I would not like everything to be equal, the same. It's normal that it is different, but these differences should be based on natural circumstances. In 10 days, the autumn period is going to start, and in the same way, in Estonia and Finland, we have a long, very light period in summers. So the whole Europe cannot be the same, but there should be some criteria that we have as the same, and there should definitely be also thresholds to proceed from. Thank you very much, Martin. I will start from questions. While you like numbers, I like assessments. And if you have now been studying all of the regulations, laws, thresholds, what is your subjective assessment? What is a positive legal space and what is negative that should not be taken as an example?
Oleg.
My subjective estimate is as follows. I would use luxes. I'm not going to talk about the levels that affect people, but the light that is visible to you from the window or when you walk on the streets. I would like to have certain limits to lighting. I can't give you the figures because I don't know what would be accurate or sufficient. And also questions from the audience. I have a comment, not a question, but somehow in 2017 a legal act was adopted, section 56. I would like to read it out. In public areas it is forbidden to create noise and light effects that disturb others, and also from 22 o'clock until 6 o'clock and during holiday times, different times, it is forbidden to create disturbing light or noise effects, which means that people are protected. And when I have talked to lawyers on this subject, no lawyer says that this is not something that you can take to court if you want to protect an individual. Prosecutors are not going to put themselves into a conflict situation with law. It is also important to point out the environment. I just want to hear about this Public Order Act. I don't know much about the lawyers. I was thinking about fireworks. Yes, indeed. If those light effects include also my neighbor's light installation, then these Public Order Acts are also regulated. But personally and our study group did not take that into account, this legal act. One more question.
Good morning. Actually, all these previous speakers has briefly mention like ecosystem and an effect on an ecosystem, but how I understand this, these studies are very human-orientated, that how these lights affect on the city and population. But are there any studies done where flora and fauna are taken in a, let's say, like in more in the center, and how we can see that what sort of effect lights and light pollution may have and has on flora and fauna? And if there are these kind of studies, then please come and talk to me. I want to know more.
If I understood the question correctly, then it was maybe mentioned in my first presentation about flora and fauna. Did you listen my first presentation? Okay. This subject was covered there, because there is a lot of studies about flora and fauna. I think Tarmo can share you our research report, where are a lot of references about those researches. So I think, because there are. One thing what also Argo brought out was the color of a light, for example, for bats. And this is just one example. There are, I can't say there are tons of it, but there are. There are even a bit more about the flora and fauna than about humans, because doing human tests is a bit harder, because only what we have are subjective opinions, which is easier to gather than do human test how light objectively would affect humans. But for flora and fauna, it's easier to do tests.
Aitäh sulle veel kord, Martin, selle põneva ja meeldiva ette.
Thank you very much, Martin, for this exciting presentation. Thank you.